here to talk to you a little bit about that history, to review how they subsisted before colonization, their connection to the land, and how this intersection of colonial forces and their livelihood played out. Let's see. Next slide. I am arguing in this presentation that pressures from both the Franciscan order and from the Spanish crown drove the Spanish into what they call Alta California, or what we now know as California. And their goals were to spread Catholicism, to develop profits and goods for Spain, and all of this required a genocide economy. There was a group in place in the area. There was a current economy in place, and in order to accomplish what they desired in the area, they needed to dismantle this. And this happened in the mission period between 1769 and 1836. I say 1836 because following the Secularization Act in Mexico in 1833, they were not immediately dismantled, and the ultimate outcome from this colonization is that the Ohlone's resources, their land, what they had was taken and redistributed to best suit Spanish endeavors. So in order to understand this instance of a genocide economy, we need to understand what a genocide economy is at all. And the inspiration for this presentation came from Wissam over there, who presented yesterday about his book, The Convergence of the Palestinian Economy Towards a Genocide Economy. And in his writing, it defines a genocide economy as one in which economic mechanisms are designed not merely to sustain war, but to dismantle the social, demographic, and economic foundations of the target population, and reorganize economic, institutional, and social systems to facilitate, normalize, and materially benefit from systematic destruction of a target population. So today I'm going to look at how did that happen in the Ohlone. In order to understand that, we need to understand where they were before the Spanish arrived. The Ohlone tribe consisted of tribelets and smaller groups that spoke distinct languages. There were 8 groups throughout the area. And there are rough estimates that there are approximately 1,000 to 2,000 people per group, so 7 to approximately 15,000 people. And this location from the Carquin Strait in the North Bay by what is currently Vallejo, California, stretching down to what is currently Salinas, California, near Big Sur. Okay, and it's vital to understand how they lived off of the land, what their relationship to the land was, how did they sustain themselves from this land, and what did their economy consist of. So the Ohlone primarily, or the Ohlone hunted and gathered food. They did seasonal burning to promote the clearance of land, to promote new growth, to promote grazing, for hunting. They harvested acorns for flour to bake breads. They hunted large game and fished. They consumed larvae of, I think, mostly bees by means of extracting them by killing the actual bees with smoke. And all of this kind of signifies to me that their economy was very labor intensive. Every step required extracting a resource, required knowing the land well, required a relationship with the area. And that brings me to the Ohlone religion, where the core mythology was centered around the bay. the Ohlone believed that coyote was the ruler of all animals, and that following a large flood, all other animals were killed off, and coyote was the one left behind. And this was said to have happened on an island after the flood, an island that is now the peak of current-day Mount Diablo. So I think that shows how strong the connection with this land was, in that their core, their roots were in the land, their religion was in the land. They used materials, surrounding materials for all of these practices. Part of this was shamanism, which encompassed medicine in the Ohlone tribe, and they used various herbs and other materials from the land to facilitate this as well. So in the Ohlone tribe, they were primarily laid out in tribelets, smaller groups, kind of littered throughout this territory that I showed you previously. And I think it's important to emphasize that the people in the Ohlone tribe were not under a super direct rule from the chief, from anyone. They had a lot of autonomy as people, and they were guided, they were, consulted by these elders, by the chief, by the shaman, but they held a lot of autonomy. And the families consisted of pretty large family units. They were 10 to 15 people, and primarily polygynous marriages. So they were accustomed to living with their people, how they pleased, and that is how they flourished. And following that, to facilitate all of this, Ohlone technology used tule grass to produce boats. They created bows and spears for hunting with sinew from animals, from local materials such as stone, obsidian being a big one, which they obtained through trade. And this just all continues to show that there was a strong foundation. They processed the materials they could use. They used a lot of what was surrounding them. And so, following that, the Spanish missions, really from the inception of them, they led to the uprooting of this system. The Spanish, as we have talked about in this conference already, colonial mindset was not a new thing. This was not a new revelation. This was not something that just came about. They had been colonizing it's now South America, Central America, and they were looking to expand up into Alta California. And this was really set off in 1769 when the Spanish crown enlisted Don Gaspar de Portola as Comandante and Junipero Serra as the father president of the missions to go into California and really safeguard it from the Russians and English who were active in the area. They aimed to convert the Ohlone tribe and any other indigenous people that they confronted along the way. They did not think of the Ohlone people as their peers, as someone on the same level as them. They, specifically Junipero Serra, but the Spanish mentality altogether sort of infantilized them and created a dynamic that was like the savior complex. We need to come in here and fix this situation. So with that, the Spanish saw their route to that as the erasure of social structures, economic structures, autonomy, and the like, what, constituted the Ohlone Tribe. So with these portrayals and the ideas that the Spanish had of the Ohlone, I think it's important to just consider that a lot of the information that has been collected was, the Spanish perspective was from these accounts. So it could be misrepresentative of what actually played out. And I think that a good example of that is that they use the exonym Costanoan for primarily like all indigenous people in this area. And I just think that that shows that they did not, there was never an effort to assimilate or to understand rather the people in the area, to work with them, to learn about them. It was, we see this inherent issue, we have a system that will change that to fix that. And the Spanish solely wanted to change their system. And how did that manifest? What did that look like for the Ohlone? The missions were really a industrial force. They produced a lot of grain, they produced a lot of goods for neighboring pueblos and Spanish developments to, grow in California and create the foundation. Sorry, 1 second. And this motivation, Spain financing the missions and creating this initiative, they were looking for a return. They wanted to see the benefit of this in terms of economics. And this created a dynamic where the priests and the people in charge of the missions, they focused on the economics. That was the core of it. They needed to be productive. And this led to the economic erasure because they needed to repurpose all of the labor. They changed the landscape. The crops that they used were extremely invasive, and there's a lot of invasive grasses and cattle and other livestock that pretty much took out the capacity for the Ohlone to function. Even if they had not taken them into the missions and forced them to stay, there would have been a serious economic constraint going forward. But all that to say, they did